bring the evening together. Thank you.
Right, hi everyone. As Phil said, my name's Sam. Just to introduce myself and where I come from and what I do. I'm a trustee of a charity called the British Youth Council, and one of the things we do is we run the UK Youth Parliament, and they've asked me to chair the debate here today, and I'm really excited. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the panellists introduce themselves. I'm going to give them 2 minutes, so they can go up to 2 minutes, but I probably won't time them, it'll just be around that figure. And they're going to introduce themselves, they're going to say what their position is, and what they're going to, and what their 2 top priorities for young people in Somerset are. And I think one really important thing to remember during this debate is this isn't like the House of Commons, we're young people, so please remember that one thing I really hate in politics is all the heckling, all the things that we see in Prime Minister's questions. I'd really like this to be about policies and about what's important to young people in Somerset. So if we can keep that in mind and remember that all the panellists have come here voluntarily today, that would be absolutely great. Okay, so I'm going to start with Mike. So if you just want to introduce yourself, your background, and your 2 top priorities for young people in Somerset.
Okay, thanks very much, Sam. Yeah. Give you something about my background. I left school when I was 15, and I started to work in engineering for an engineering company in Hereford, first of all. I then decided that I wanted a change in my career, but I didn't have the qualifications. So I went to a mature students' college where I was able to obtain a qualification that could get me into university. I then went to university where I read history, and from then I did a PGCE course where I became a qualified teacher eventually. I moved to Bridgwater in 1976, and I used to teach at the local school, which is just across there now. Different name, but it was then the Great School when I arrived. And I taught there until 1997. I then worked for the National Union of Teachers. I'm also leader of the Labour group on the Sedgemoor District Council. I'm also a Bridgwater Town councillor as well. I'm standing in this election as the Labour Party candidate. And my 2 sort of real values, if you like, for young people, which are part of the Labour Party policy, is to reduce tuition fees from 9,000 to 6,000, and also to make sure there is an apprenticeship for all school leavers if they get their qualifications as well. So those are basically my 2 values, which come from Labour Party policy.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Callum?
Hi, I'm Callum. I'm the Deputy Member of Youth Parliament for South Somerset and the Regional Executive of the South West Youth Parliament. Myself and Jess, we sort of have 2 separate campaigns run alongside each other. So mine's political education in secondary school, because I feel that it's so important in such a political system like we have now that young people are interested in politics and how they feel that politics can work for them. So obviously I'm going to be looking tonight at the educational side of politics.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Callum. Theo?
Hi, I'm Theo Philip. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate for Bridgwater and West Somerset. I come from Somerset originally. I used to live in Wells, but now live in Bridgwater. After leaving school, I went off to university in Lancaster, studied politics, international relations, and then came back to Somerset. Political campaigns, but mostly I've worked in communications and stakeholder engagement for the property sector. That's essentially working with local communities and property developers on large-scale property developments across the country to try and ensure that the needs of local communities are met. My 2 priorities for young people in this election, I think, are opportunities and quality of life. So opportunities means both educational opportunities, making sure there are places for people to go on and study and get decent quality education, free from barriers as much as possible, but also employment opportunities, jobs, and ensuring that we have decent apprenticeship opportunities for people who want those. And the quality of life aspect needs to look at issues like transport, particularly in rural areas. It's hugely important to have accessible and affordable transport for young people, and housing, which is hugely expensive and very difficult for people to get onto the property ladder or move into residential accommodation from deeply residential. So those are my two priorities.
Okay, Vandy Jess.
My name is Jessica Hill, and I am the NYT for South Somerset. I've lived in Somerset my whole life. And as Callum said, we are running our campaigns alongside each other. Mine is for Youth Voice, it's 20 years for political awareness in youth. Basically, what I want to achieve in my 2-year term is to just get more children and youth on councils and just make sure that they all have a voice and ways to get their views heard.
Okay, thanks, Jess. Okay, so I've just been going through the questions, and I think we're going to start with this one. I'm going to give each of the panelists about a minute to respond, but as I say, I'm not timing, it's just going to be a rough minute in my head. And then I'm going to give them a chance to challenge each other if they wish to challenge each other, and then I'm going to put it out to you guys to make any comments that you want to make. Okay, so this question is, how will you engage young people in politics? And I think we're going to start with V8.
Okay, well, I think engaging young people in politics in many ways is the same as engaging anyone in politics. The same principles apply. You need to get out there, talk to people, treat them with respect, listen to them, and respond. I use a number of methods for communicating with people. Obviously, I spend time out knocking on doorsteps and visiting people. I also try and make the most I can of social media, Twitter and Facebook. I use those quite a lot as a great way of communicating with people across a constituency like this, which is hugely varied and wide-ranging geographically. And obviously, those systems have a relatively younger demographic than much else. If I'm elected as a member of Parliament for Bridgwater, I'm hoping to spend an awful lot of time visiting schools and colleges and other appropriate venues where I can meet with young people regularly and discuss the issues that are important.
Okay, brilliant. And Mike?
Thanks very much. Yeah, I think first of all, probably starting off at school is quite important. It might not be on a political level, but it might be on a decision-making level. Some schools now have schools councils whereby they elect people to represent their year group, represent their tutor group. And it's about making those decisions at school level, which might be a simple thing like we would like some seating where we can sit down and just have a discussion during break time, or that we would like perhaps some entertainment that we could have. We would like to be able to stay indoors when it's raining rather than going out at break time. Those simple decisions that you're making, are about you deciding what you want for the institution where you're being educated. And I think that's a really good starting place in terms of understanding a little bit about politics. I don't know how many of you talk to your parents about politics as well, because it's not just about us engaging with you, it's about you engaging with that adult world. And I was really impressed about the referendum in Scotland, whereby the vote was given to 16-year-olds, how important that debate was for them, and how good they were in terms of that decision process that they were going through, deciding do they want independence or to stay with the United Kingdom. So I think those are the ways that we can actually start. But it's about, organising and making decisions for yourself, wherever you might be. That might take you off into university later on, or it might take you into the workplace. But those are your opportunities to discuss and decide sometimes if you are going to actually be a leader in that type of environment as well.
Okay, brilliant. Callum?
Well, this question links in very well with my campaigns. I think sometimes when some politicians say, well, we need to get the youth involved and we're going to use things like Facebook and Twitter and all things like that, people that go onto those Facebook sites, people that go onto those Twitter sites are going on there because they're already interested. And it seems to me like sometimes we're preaching to the converted. And I think we need to, well, for me, to get politics into schools and show children, young people, how politics can actually affect them. Because most young people don't think that politics works for them and don't think that politics can change things for them. So we need to show them how politics can work for them, how using your vote is possibly one of the most important things you can actually do. And I think that's how you should engage people.
Brilliant. And then finally, Jess.
I think it's a very important question because politics is everywhere in whatever we do. Politics isn't just with the Lib Dems and the Conservatives and Labour and all the big questions going on. It's all the little decisions that we make during our everyday lives. It's very important that we keep young people interested in what's going on in the bigger picture as well, though. And I think that could be reached by just talking, just casually bringing up things, debates, more debates, ideas, different ideas that we can spread by word of mouth. Simply. And I think we can do that in our everyday lives, just everyone take responsibility by spreading the word.
Thank you. Just a quick one before I ask them to challenge each other. I just wanted to introduce you all to Neil Guild, who's the Labour parliamentary candidate for Taunton. So if any of you live Taunton way, you might want to have a chat with him after the debates. Okay, so have any of you got any points you'd like to raise with each other?
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
Here we go.
I think you all gave fairly similar answers. One thing that you mentioned, Mike, was voted 16. Is that something you'd support?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be in the Labour manifesto, and 60-year-olds will have the vote. And what was quite interesting about this, when I was speaking to students at Bridgwater College and mentioned this, one of the students said, well, if I am going to have the vote at 16, do I need to get my parents' permission? And I said, no, you most certainly don't. And, but, parents' permission is asked for things like if you go into the army or anything else like that. But no, we need to, we were impressed by what happened up in Scotland, as I said earlier, and that's why the vote will be coming down to 16 to 17-year-olds as well in the future. And I think that will be part of the engagement. That will be part of the engagement because what politicians do, what governments do, will affect young people.
And Theo, I know the voted 16 was on the 2010 Liberal Democrat manifesto, but it's something you personally support.
Yeah, last time there was a government consultation on this, I think it was 2003. I was thinking of it just the other day because I was reading about something like this. But the reason I was looking at it is because I actually, back then, 12 years ago, I submitted representations to it saying just this, saying that the age of voting should be reduced to 16. So it's something that I do personally support and I have supported for a very long time. It's something that the Liberal Democrats, as you say, put in the 2010 manifesto, but actually it's been in Lib Dem policy for a very long time. And I don't see that changing. So I very much hope, obviously it's been said that this is going to happen. I very much hope it is going to happen. It's something that I've pressed for a long time. We will see how much appetite there is within the next government for that. Certainly, I can be certain that within any Liberal Democrat elements of the next government or future governments, that will be something that we will support. But it is necessary to get the support of the others as well.
Okay, and the other thing that Mike mentioned as well, which struck out to me in my head, was about school councils. And I was wondering if the younger members of the panel would answer whether they were on a school council at school. I know you're still in school, and how effective they thought school councils were.
Yes, I am on the school council, and although we do try and make decisions that will affect people in our school in positive ways, it's quite difficult to manage budgets and keep everyone happy, and there's not many changes that we can make just on the council ourselves.
Yeah.
It'd be more important, I think, if we got more people involved, because it's just a few representatives each year, like a boy and a girl, maybe different form. We can't. School council is really underrepresented, and no one really takes into consideration our voice very much. It's sort of just.
So you don't feel like you're listening to that.
Not as much as we should be.
Okay, is that just to get a sense of that? Is that something you've all? If you just raise hands, is that something that you've experienced as well, or at Chelsea?
I'm the representative of my group in my school council, and I think because there are things like this, 16, they don't really have to listen to young people. You're not going to have to vote for to do however old you are, yeah, so you don't really have to listen to as much as you really need to. Like, I completely agree with that. Like, our views aren't acknowledged much, and it's kind of to say, yeah, we consulted young people just to say that they've done that, but putting into practice what we've actually said. Oh, okay, like a school council, yeah.
Okay, cool. I mean, I think that's obviously worrying to hear, but I think it does vary from place to place, certainly from what I've been told. The school I know best, the school I went to, I sort of stay in touch with, has, I'm told, done great things in terms of engaging people through their school council, and all sorts of subgroups responsible for different projects and such like. I think does depend on where you are, but I'd like to see a lot more done to engage young people with the running of their schools, because they are your schools.
I'm going to take this back to policy. Would you support maybe including school council, how well school councils run on the school's Ofsted inspection?
Well, I mean, within the school environment, obviously, students are spoken to about their school. I don't think there's really enough. I'd like to see much greater evaluation. In other words, students want from their school. And if you question students about what they want from their school, they will actually say things like, "I'd like my teacher to listen to me. I'd like my teacher to mark the work, my homework, and so forth." They go through a list of things that they want from their school, which are quite different sometimes to what even Ofsted would be looking at in their environment, in their education environment. So I think that, if you look at a school, you've got to say to yourself, well, who are the users? Students?
Get some reactions to what you think of.
With obviously dropping the vote to 16, 17-year-olds, you say you want to, I don't know, educate them and whatnot. Will you put this? I think it's better than putting it into the syllabus or curriculum or whatever you call it straight away. So starting in September, you put it in there, and it's you sort of like guide you towards. They need to come out of school and college knowing children shops and whatnot. They need to understand the law and politics and know who to vote for, what is right and what's wrong. Their own morals and standards obviously come into it, but they need to understand what your manifestos are to then put them into practice themselves. Is that something you agree with, or?
Well, in terms of, obviously the sort of values that you were talking about there, the morals, is this right or is that wrong? That's obvious, and I think that needs to be part and parcel of that whole thing about citizenship. But I think, politics and voting and everything else, that's part of being an active citizen as well. And that needs to be embedded into your life, not just your school, but in your life generally, about, the way that we challenge people about, should you be doing that? Should you be, perhaps not telling your parents where you are? Should you be doing that? And that's about the way that we challenge. What sort of values we really want to hold, which are not always political, but actually sort of about you as a person and defining you as a person as well.
Okay, was there anything Panelist like to respond to that?
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important that we educate young people about how citizenship, politics, democratic systems work, and so I would put that in there. Having said that, whilst you tell me that young people don't know about politics, actually, I meet a lot of people, and I don't discern the enormous gap in the level of knowledge and understanding between many 16 and 17-year-olds and many 18, 19, 30, 40, 50-year-olds. There isn't enough understanding across the whole age spectrum, not just an issue about young people. And I can tell you I've spoken to an awful lot of people over the last 10 years in politics. But for me, reducing the voting age to 16 is a matter of principle. We're actually in the first constituency where people voted at 18. The first time that 18-year-olds were able to cast their vote in 70 Bridgwater by-election just after the law changed. And there are all sorts of worries then that reducing it from 21 to 18 was going to have people who were, too much in hot to their parents simply being told what to do. And it hasn't happened. I don't think it would happen with 16 and 17-year-olds. And I actually think we should set the age for voting as low as is reasonable. There do have to be checks, but anyone who is capable of making a rational decision and exercising their judgment. Voting isn't just about going out and doing what you think is right for you. I think everyone has a duty to go out and vote so that any of us are using our judgment to try and decide what we think is in the best interests of the constituency, our local area, of the country, and of the world.
Can I just sort of come back on that a little bit, because I think that's quite important in an area. I mean, Bridgwater used to have a port in the centre of the town, and standing on either quay would be slaves. And Bridgwater decided that they didn't want to actually take part in the slave trade anymore. So the abolition of slavery came about. So when that came about, slavery then became a real big issue. Should we actually have people who are slaves? And that can come about by different pressure groups as well. People who feel quite strongly about one issue. It might be people who are in prison, Amnesty International. It might be about, if you like, defence or media disarmament. Different groups can actually, people can get involved in those groups as well. But equally, when we have a democracy day for the students within Bridgwater, they have to say about what they want in their town as well. That's quite important. A lot of them were really annoyed that the splash went, and they didn't have that anymore, which was their leisure club. And so they do have an important opportunity to sort of put their points forward to say, is that really right? Because we enjoyed that area for our recreation.
Okay, one of the things I wanted to ask Ali was who actually put this question in the pot. We said to put names on the questions, but somebody didn't have them. I was just wondering what you thought about what's been said. If you want to answer this question.
Come on, one of you is responsible for our 15 minutes. Who is it?
It's a very, very good question related to my campaign, so I love it.
I think if he wants to own up to I don't think it's that bad a question, to be honest. I
mean, we could say that it was a great question.
It was a brilliant
All we want to know is who asked it. We're not going to question the one.
Okay, Neil, then it was you.
Oh yeah, I was just going to bring it back to your point. So it's very important that we utilise all the time we have in schools with school potential, and I think we should teach people young so that we can make sure that we can cultivate minds when they're older, because it's very hard to change an opinion or to stop people being laissez-faire about their opinions as they get older. But if you teach someone about it, if you empower someone young, then you can change revolutionise a whole generation.
Brilliant. I should say as well that I want to keep this as interactive as possible. So if you want to say something during the debate, please put your hand up and I'll try and get to you. Go.
Do you feel like 16 or 17-year-olds are more likely to vote for things that are more suited to them, as in, like, they're going to, vote for university funds to be lowered, or things that will benefit them more than, the whole country? Because, as you said already, 16, 17-year-olds aren't going to be massively educated as everybody's that fact, but I think they're
unfortunately,
this, you could say that about any category in society. I mean, a 70-year-old woman may not vote her because it's lowering student fees, but she's going to love it because she's got a triple lock on her pension or something like that, you know? So it's by the by, it's going to happen to every section of society. And I think you can put that as a...
Sorry, that just reminded me. Sorry, just reminded me. I was reading this article in the Independent. There's an interview with Cheryl Cole the other day, and that's how she was voting in the general election. And she said, "Oh, I'm not sure I'm going to vote Labour because I normally vote Labour, but there's the mansion tax, but I still might vote Labour." It doesn't affect the voting. She felt that the mansion tax, I'm not giving an opinion on it either way, but she felt that it was better for the country that she voted for Labour and got the mansion tax, even though it affected her badly personally. So maybe that's something that 16 and 17-year-olds can do as well.
Yeah.
Why-
I mean,
their son or daughter could be better off in that way. But you know, some people will highlight a big issue for them that's important, and therefore that affects the impact on the way they're going to vote. Whereas some people will go for a collection of sort of policies whereby they feel that, you know, that seems the right way forward for them and how they vote. Others are very traditional sometimes because of the way that their parents are voting. I mean, even when I left home, my father used to make me go home to vote, and I said, "Well, there's no real need for me to go. I have to do a postal vote, and you know, you've got to come home, and you've got to make that to the polling station and vote." And that was, you know, when I was still, you know, working away at home at that time, because he always registered me there rather than I could register where I was living.
Okay, would you very much agree? Do you very much agree with Hannah in that everyone is going to vote for something that's right for them? And if that gets into politics, I think it's a good idea. But it's also going to push people into making things better for young people, not just other people who are going to be voting. If 6-year-olds are the most active voting people who are the most country, then it's most likely that to get themselves in power, they're going to make more 6-year-old targeted policies. But if you get 16-year-olds voting and you empower them and they believe that it's important and very good and make it easier to do what helps them, then maybe it's a good idea, maybe it makes more policies make it easier for young people as time goes on.
I'm a great admirer of Russell Johnson. He was right about many things, but he was wrong about some. Usually right reasons. Johnson believed that we shouldn't have a secret ballot. The reason he believed that, and he was wrong, he should, but the reason he believed it, he was right. He thought that when we were voting, as I touched on earlier, we were going to use our judgment in the best interest of the community. As a result, he felt that we should demonstrate to the community by saying it openly what we do, but we weren't just being selfish. We were trying to say now, there are many reasons why we should have a secret ballot and why that's a utopian but totally unworkable system. I'd like to see people, everyone, just vote on the community, but it happens to be the case that people vote in their own interests. And having 16 and 17-year-olds as a counterweight to all the people who are, you know, in their 50s, 60s, 70s voting in their own interests is no bad thing. Successive governments over decades have prioritised older people over younger people because that's an enormous voting bloc. Not just it's a large group of people who can vote, but who do vote. It's one of the reasons why it's so essential that young people who can vote do vote. Whether it's 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds now, or in the future 16, 17.
Brilliant. Can I take one last comment on this question and we'll move to the next one?
Okay, yeah. I just like to know if you potentially thought that the reason there's such a massive interest in politics and younger in there is the lack of knowledge about national identity. Because I was actually at school the other day and I pointed to the island in the map and said, which country is this? And the majority of them just said, this is England. And it's like they're not actually being educated, a lot of them, by their parents in our parliamentary democracy or the democratic process. So a lot of it is they're not being taught it very easy to be taught in school because a lot of parents have got taking in the system and I'm not
Yeah, I mean, you know, I accept what you're saying because it's a sort of a personal case here. But, you know, there are a lot of people who are not voting. You know, in terms of this general election, we're going to be getting around about 70% of people voting, which is really quite low as compared to other countries. And, you know, Theo was talking about secret ballots. In fact, one of the things you can't really test in this country is what we call an exit poll. In other words, you're asking people, which way did you vote when they've come out of the poll? Because it's not very reliable. They tend to go in and vote one way and then tell the exit poll another way that they voted. But I think that, you know, getting people to vote and participate, and I think that politicians have damaged that to a certain extent with the expenses standard. That they were seen as being selfish, and for many people, they've been turned off politics because of that.
There's not all politicians alive, but there are alive out there. And then, of course, you get sessions and all that, and then that goes back, and people don't feel that they can use their vote to make it better. They say that everyone's the same. But what they should really say is, right, it exists, but let's find something that we can make it better. Let's think how we can make it better. Not just all politicians are the same, I don't care about my country anymore.
I think I agree with you.
Yeah. Would anybody else like to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important that we try and instill a sense in everyone, not just young people, but in everyone, that taking part in this process as part of the country, as part of the community, is important. To some extent, we get the politicians we deserve. Both of us who are standing in the general election in this, through in this room now, we're just volunteers. We're just basically ordinary members of our communities who decided that we want to stand up and make a difference. We do an awful lot more people trying to stand up and make a difference and get involved with it. Because if you leave it to somebody else, well, you'll get what you've got now.
Okay,
I just wanted to raise something about the issue of voting or not voting. It concerns me greatly that if you're not registered to vote by the 20th of April, you won't have a vote. And I fear that a lot of, perhaps particularly young people, may not be aware of that, because there hasn't been a great deal of publicity about it. I know there has been publicity, but recently I went to the Borough of Newham, and there were posters everywhere saying, make sure you vote by the 20th of April.
Vote. And I think that should have been done nationally, and it should have been the responsibility of the government to do that actually, but it hasn't been done. And I just wanted to raise that because there may even be people here who think they've got to vote and they may not have, because it's actually quite easy to drop off the register if you've, for example, left home and gone off to college or something, or worked out in another place, and you're no longer on your parents' register. You may not be aware of that. And I just wanted to flag that up because I don't hear enough said about that. And I think it's a real concern, you know, just in terms of who actually find they can vote on the day.
To coincide with that, I would like to ask the two candidates here, would you like to allow people to register on the day, on actual polling day?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think anything against that. And the unfortunate thing is that happens is that you see somebody come along, believes that they're on the register, can't be. But if there's a possibility of doing that, we have the technology. There shouldn't be any reason why that cannot be checked and they can do that on the day. There are people who come along and they have a proxy vote. They vote on behalf of a relative within or somebody within their home because they're allowed to do that because they might be a serving soldier or whatever. They do that on their behalf. So the whole thing is, I think that can happen. But you're quite right. There are going to be a lot of people who are going to be disappointed if they go to the poll and find they can't vote.
Okay. Yeah, if you have a proxy vote, if you happen to be serving in the armed forces and have a proxy vote, be careful who you give it to. My grandfather, the end of 1945, was overseas, gave his proxy vote to his father, said go and vote Labour. There was no Liberal candidate back then. And he went and voted Conservative, so make sure you give it to somebody you trust. But proxy votes are a useful way of voting if you're out of the country. Yeah, I'm very open to making registration open till pretty much the last possible minute. If you look at the system we have now, there is nothing about it, essentially, that makes the 20th of April an important date. Nothing happens very much after the 20th of April. The other parties don't check the people who are registered. There's very little scrutiny going on. If it was the case that this register came out on the 20th of April and then there was an enormous amount of scrutiny to check that people were in the right place, then there might be a case for having the deadline as it is. But as that isn't happening, I don't see any reason for having the deadline a lot later.
Okay, brilliant.
They should all have their polling cards now, so anybody who can vote knows that they can vote.
Okay, right. I want to move on to the next question because we've got a name on this one. So this is from Charlotte Scott from the Somerset Young Farmers, and she's one. Okay, hi Charlotte. Okay, your question is, and I might need to reword this slightly to make it more general because it's very specific. Young Farmers helps to support young people living in rural areas. Why is it that despite organisations, funding has been cut? If I can just make this...
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Sorry. What they're basically asking is why has the funding for young farmers been cut in Somerset? If I can make this more broad, because I know that neither party is part of the Somerset County Council, so they probably wouldn't have been privy to that decision. I would make it more broad and ask, should there be more funding for organisations like the Somerset Young Farmers? And if so, where should this funding come from?
Well, my sort of initial response is lobby, go and lobby your local councillor and try to make a change that way. And that's what you need to do, because some of this funding is what they call discretionary. They can give it or they don't have to give it. And you will find from the county council that you have at the moment, they're moving away from a lot of discretionary funding. It's not just your organisation, it's youth provision and so forth. We have made a decision at Bridgwater Town Council to keep the youth provision going from our funds because there was a demand for it. And we took a group of young people from Rollercoaster down to the county council to explain why youth provision should not be cut, how useful it was, how good it was. So as you're a rural organisation, and you are, to a certain extent, it's difficult for people, young people in the rural community to get to other places as well. You're cut off. Your cost of living is even going to be higher than people who are in the town. What you need to do is, within your organisation, this is going almost back to the previous question, organise around that, see your local councillors, actually try to get that onto the agenda again and make your point as to why funding is important to you. And especially what we've seen recently with all the flooding and everything else that's going on, young farmers played a big active role in that, helping their community. So I think, if you can't get the funding from the council, look for somewhere else where you might get that funding as well. There's a foundation that might be prepared to actually say, yes, we want to fund you because your community might have been impacted upon by the flooding and so forth. So that's what you need to do.
Okay, can I go to Jess next?
Well, I think it's kind of a shame that funding is being cut for important organisations that help young people. I think it's important that we keep the money flowing. I mean, I know it's difficult. I know it's difficult with all the different things that funding's being cut for everything right recently. But I think it's really important that young people have an outlet, and it's not just an outlet that is helping them personally, but it's also helping people. And I think we should continue to fund things that not just the one person, but everyone.
Okay, I'll go to Callum next.
not going to sit here as a member of funding for the council from Westminster being cut to start off with. So then when it comes to the county council and even your parish councils and even things like that, are they then trying to find cuts? And they think, well, and this links back to the very first point, because students haven't got the vote, well, we'll just cut their services because we know that they're not going to vote. So you've got to look at it in the broader scheme, apart from just the county council scheme, well, they've just chosen to cut the youth funding. Well, is it being cut? Is the whole pot of money being cut to start off with?
Okay, and finally, Theo. Obviously, Theo is part of a government, a party that is in government. So, just thought I'd point that.
Thanks. Yeah. No, it's true.
It's his fault. It's his fault, all right?
Everything is my fault. That's right. Mick caused it for 14 years, and now it's my fault. I think something like that. No, we'll avoid that. I know you want us to avoid.
They had the young farmers' money then.
It's all of them's fault.
The truth is, as has just been touched upon, there isn't as much money to go round as there used to be. Within the whole government, basically, and that's very, very sad. It's a result of a number of factors which are a number of people's fault. There has been a massive global economic problem. We spent many years in this country both living beyond our means and, in fact, being wildly over-reliant on income from the City of London, from bankers, so that when the banks collapsed, essentially, not only did we have to bail them out in order to prevent even wider, even deeper economic harm, but huge amounts of previous tax revenue completely disappeared because we were happily taking this money from casino bankers who were, we would have to let them get away with whatever they wanted as long as they were happy to pay into the British government's funding, and that's all come to an end. So there isn't as much money to go around, and that's deeply sad, and we're all suffering as a result. But why specifically has youth funding and funding for the young farmers been cut? I have to say, as we've touched on already, it's because you're a soft target. It's because young people either don't have the vote or don't vote, or the people who are making these decisions about where the cuts should be are deciding that it's not going to lose them enough votes, and there isn't going to be enough of a fuss made about it, and they can get away with it. And it's up to people like you to try and make sure that they can't get away with it, to try and make sure that a fuss is made, because unfortunately nobody else is going to do that.
Okay, Chelsea.
So I don't really understand how you expect young people to trust you and your party then if in the current government you have cut things like young farmers, and on a completely different topic, you have raised tuition fees. So coming up to the general election, I don't really know how you expect young people to trust you.
Just to clarify that, I would expect that it was Somerset County Council who
Yeah.
cut the young farmers directly, and that's
But other youth services, obviously,
yeah.
other youth services as well, your party has had an influence on that.
Well, we're talking about the overall government pot having been reduced, and that wasn't the fact that there's not as much money to go around isn't a decision which my party specifically made. That's just a fact of the government finances being in a particularly difficult position, and the cuts do have to come somewhere. Yeah, there's the Somerset County Council has less money to spend as a result of the government giving it less money. That's a result of there simply not being as much money to go around. So we're just having to be realistic and face up to the economic situation there is. As for the tuition fees issue, that was a deeply disappointing decision. It's one, I think young people have been let down by politicians of all parties. The Conservatives briefly had a policy of abolishing tuition fees. The Labour Party went into 2 elections, first saying they wouldn't introduce them, second saying they wouldn't increase them. And then, of course, we've got the situation which has happened with the Liberal Democrats. Now, I was one of the people who forced that to stay in the manifesto. I was on the committee that was responsible for the last manifesto.
I just need to remind people on the panel, we have got to get through quite a lot of these questions, so if we could keep answers as brief and concise as possible, that would be absolutely great. Charlotte, what do you think about what's been said?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I don't think it is just young farmers that has been cut, and obviously it is a shame that so many youth organisations have been cut. But I understand that it's not just coming straight from Somerset, it's possibly a wider issue. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So unless we've got any more comments on that one, I think we should move on to. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. With the you've cut like funding for young farmers and other youth organisations, groups, social groups, whatever. So then you've also cut police funding. So what are you going to do with all the young people that can't go to these clubs and are now committing crimes on the street, and causing trouble and causing hassle? Because let's face it, young people just they do that.
Can I just say we've got a question about the police
Oh,
service
no,
later,
fine.
so we might be able to
That's fine,
encapsulate
okay,
that
that's
in that
fine.
question later. Brilliant. So we can move on to the next question, and this is from Kira, who is the Member of Youth Parliament for Taunton Dean
And West Somerset.
and West Somerset. Okay, so Kira's asking about legal highs. So she says, legal highs are a huge problem in Somerset. How would you help tackle this and support our community? Okay, so I think I'm going to go with, you've gone first, you've gone first. So Callum's going to go first. Because he tried to drop Jess in
a
it.
huge problem in Somerset. How will you help tackle it? Well, I can't help really tackle it, I'm afraid. I think I'm right in saying that you've been on a clear up, haven't you? Because you're in the police cadet, aren't you? So you've been on like a clear up. And if we keep on doing this clear up, I don't think a lot is mentioned about it in local press. I don't hear loads about it. I mean, I know it hit national news, didn't it? When did it hit national newspapers? It was on the front page of one of the national newspapers.
It's hit national newspapers every so often, and it's often mentioned in the Somerset County Gazette, but it doesn't often reach out to young people. It doesn't often reach out into schools either, because these things aren't talked about. Illegal drugs are, but legal drugs aren't. And I don't think that young people know enough about them, and because young people don't often look to the press through newspapers, often through their phones and things, it's not often mentioned on things like BBC News, on Sky News apps. I think that needs to happen more often.
Well, I'm perfectly honest, I know nothing about legal highs, so I think I'm a great example of how youth don't understand them, because I don't understand them. So I don't really have a lot to say on it, I don't know what they are.
I might do something slightly unconventional here. I know that legal highs are a particular problem in Taunton, so I wondered if Neil might want to speak on this.
Briefly, so thanks. No, Kira has actually done a really good campaign in Taunton Dean. She was in the Gazette the other day about it, and it has been something that's coming up in Taunton Dean because there's been one particular shop in Taunton. It's a very difficult issue because there was some recent good stuff where 5 legal high drugs were banned quite recently. But the moment you ban one, another one can be generated. It's just a matter of chemistry, really. What you could probably do is amend one of the acts around antisocial behaviour to include shops like the one we're talking about in Taunton Dean. The other one you could use is food standards agencies to cover, make the shops more responsible for the actual drugs that they sell. It's a very difficult issue though, because then you don't want to be putting out, because you get alternative medicine shops as well that sell stuff. You don't necessarily want to be putting them out of business. It's quite a difficult balancing act you have to put on it. I think education in schools is a really key part of it, and I think that's making sure our people understand the dangers of legal highs, and probably looking at drugs policy reform as well, because that again is an issue. But because the slight irony of this is that some of the actual kind of known illegal drugs are to a degree safer in many ways than some of the illegal high drugs, which are a bit of an unknown quantity. We don't really know the long-term impacts of many of these drugs, and those are the kind of the range of policies you could probably put in place to address the particular problem about legal highs. It's been discussed quite widely in Taunton. So, but that's my set of.
Okay, brilliant. If I can move to Theo next, and then I'll go to Jess, if that's okay.
Yeah, it seems to me that the big issue is dealing with the shops, really, and making sure that when people are selling things, those whatever it is they're selling is regulated and safe, and people know what they're getting. It's a combination of that and educating people about what they're doing, because going down the route of constantly banning things is something I'm instinctively against, and has just been alluded to. Our current drugs policy has possibly fueled some of the problems we're now seeing. So I think education and regulation of shops are probably the best ways to go down.
Okay, and then Jess.
I'd like to disagree with Callum when he said we can't do anything about it. Personally, I think he meant young people as a whole. And although the problem, I think, is directed at young people for this question, I think it is really important that we bring it back to education and funding cuts. I mean, if we're going to cut things like youth, young farmers, or different places where youth can go to hang out, to do what they want, then there's going to be different people on the streets, people going around doing things at possibly legal highs, obviously. And I think it's really important that we educate people against doing these things instead of just banning it. Because if you make a rule against something and you don't explain why, no one's going to believe in the rule, no one's going to uphold it to a standard. If you make it so everyone understands why, how, when, where, they make you understand the real consequences, then you'll just understand it more, and it's less likely there'll be a problem.
Okay.
Can I just?
Yes.
I think that the whole thing about legal highs were available before all of a sudden they've now become shops within our towns. And I understand that the Taunton, when I was speaking to the police about this, Taunton legal high shop was closed down under antisocial behaviour. They were able to do that because of the nuisance factor that generated from that particular shop.
It went through the courts. It's gone through the courts twice now under the Antisocial Behaviour Act that came in play last year. But in a few months' time, it will go back to the courts again on whether it will open or stay shut for good. So it's sort of an ongoing battle at the moment between the community and us. So it's sort of something that's going on.
And I think when we're talking about it, it is about, how can we make a change? Because obviously talking to the police, we try to find out whether or not that particular shop that we have close to us is actually causing a problem. And at the same time, one of the other concerns that we've had, and this is something that even the Labour group on Sedgemoor District Council was able to actually bring about some sort of change, and that was on fixed odds betting terminals in betting shops, which have led to huge increase in sort of gambling, but also huge losses to some people, thousands of pounds, because they can actually put in a sort of a debit card, credit card, whatever, into this machine and lose. And we're trying to get those fixed at just a £2 bet, similar to in other institutions. But those are things that are a danger on our high street in that way, simply because betting shops make an awful lot of money from these fixed odd betting terminals, because they take a lot of money rather than bets over the counter. And I think the legal highs, again, is something that we need to look at those shops, because what do they have for our streetscape? And also, what is that impact on that community as well?
Okay, so we've got some hands up. I don't want to dwell on this topic for ages and ages, so we can make the comments short and then make the responses short. That would be absolutely great. I think I'm going to go to Ginger Girl Eloise.
I'd like to go back to Jess's point. And you said that we shouldn't ban them, we should just educate, and then people will make their own decisions. And I, like Callum, know very little about legal highs, but I do know that they are drugs and they're potentially dangerous. And I don't think that education is enough. And I don't think that you can teach a couple of lessons and expect students to not go anywhere near them. I mean, illegal drugs are still commonly used. So how would that actually have an effect?
And then Chelsea.
We did a consultation on this in Parliament not so long ago. I think all of us emphasised the fact that legal doesn't mean it's safe. It is legal, can be lethal. I think it is more of a relevant issue for kind of Bridgwater at the moment. There has been a shop that's been opened. I don't think it's been in the news enough. I won't name the shop, but they actually do door-to-door sales. So you could ring them up and you could be like, hey, I want so-and-so, and they will come to your door and actually directly give you it. I've had friends affected by it. I obviously won't name who. And it can be as bad as an illegal drug. And I do think education isn't enough, but I think education is a start, actually educating young people. And then like smoking as well, like the alcohol, that's touched on with like PSHE lessons, but not legal highs, and it really does need to be.
Okay, I'd really like to finish up this bit of the debate. But what I would like to do first is ask who here is aware of legal highs? Just hands up. Okay, that's quite a large proportion. That's great. I was just wondering, like an issue it was to you guys, and how much knowledge there was of it, but clearly it's quite a lot. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. This is actually Chelsea's question. What do you intend to do about mental health? And she's got, e.g., invest more money. Okay, so who's going first? So who's going first? Mike's going first. Carl's going first. Jess?
I would definitely invest more money if I could. Sadly, I don't think I'd personally be able to do much. I'm just going to bring it back to youth empowerment. I do think it's very important that we get the votes at 16, so these sort of issues can be pressed more by youth. But it doesn't just affect youth, obviously. It affects everyone. It affects, I think it was like 1 in 4 people have mental health problems. And it's not a select few. It's a big part of our community. And I think it's very important that it's tackled in a very clear way, in a very clinical, calm way, and that it's not making people ostracized from society or leaving people out. It's treating and helping and supporting everyone through whatever they're going through.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very important question, especially for young people as well. And we've seen the services within schools, camp services, have been cut as well, which is working with children with mental health issues. And I think that I know at my own party, we're actually bringing that into the right up high in terms of healthcare, along with caring as well, sort of bringing it right into the sort of National Health Service and making sure that we deal with that, because often it's something that is held as a secret. People are not open about that as well. I've worked with people who suffer now and again with severe depression and mental health illness. What we've said, this is, we understand it, we work with it, we can actually say, look, that person might need a little bit of time off work and they're back again, and we can deal with it. And I've met, with my friends and some of their children who have been through very difficult mental health illnesses, and we must bring it out in the open. It is an illness like other illnesses, and we must just go about the way that we can actually work and treat it, rather than seeing it as a taboo and people keep it secretly. That will take some time. Often people in the past, if they've been disabled, have kept it as a secret because they think society will punish them in some way, or an employer will punish them. We need to be far more open about this. People will have a mental health illness now, and what we've got to do is just treat it as any other illness that is around.
Okay, again, if I can remind panelists, we really do need to keep these answers as short as possible. Okay, Callum.
Well, I'm with Mike on the fact that it needs to be brought into the NHS, and there needs to be more money funded into the NHS around mental health. But I think if we're looking at young people as a section in society, I think we need to look at how mental health is dealt with in schools. And I think teachers need to be taught how to deal with someone who has a mental health condition, because I'm not sure if many teachers would know if you went to a teacher and said, oh, I have depression or something like that, that they would know exactly what to do. And I think it's keeping it I don't know how to explain it, but it's almost there needs to be easy access for students constantly about where they can get help in schools, I think.
Can I just say on that? Well, for those who don't know, I do have diagnosed anxiety, and there have been times where I have gone to my teachers, and although they've been very supportive, they just genuinely don't know what to do because they haven't been trained in it. They don't know the different experiences. Can we just
save this for after all the panelists have given their initial response?
Yes, I'd just state the practicality of what importance of that.
Yeah, mental health services have been a Cinderella service for far too long. I have friends and family who suffered from mental health issues, and in fact, we probably all do, because as has been alluded to, 1 in 4 people are likely to suffer from a mental health problem at some point in their life. That's that's a quarter of the population. That's an awful lot of people in this room. One of the things I'm proudest of that my party is doing in this election campaign is putting that at the heart of our manifesto. This isn't because it's an issue that we've polled and decided that this is going to be a really sexy issue that will get us a load of votes. It's because we decided it's actually an important issue that needs to be heard. So we've put into our manifesto that we'll try and create parity of service between mental and physical health, putting maximum waiting times in place for mental health services, the same as physical health services, and also putting an extra £500 million into mental health services to try and bring the standards up.
Okay, if I can go to Kira first, because I know I interrupted her, and then.
Yes, I was saying that in schools there doesn't seem to be enough sort of support for young people, because it's taken a very long time for me to try and get the help I really need. The teachers I've approached, these teachers that I trust, don't often know what to do because of lack of training, lack of experience with it. And I think that it can be almost quite, I don't know, you almost sort of separate yourself from the school environment because of it, because you almost don't feel sort of totally accepted because they don't quite understand. And although I haven't quite let my mental health illnesses become who I am, there are many young people who almost become swallowed by it because of the lack of help. And I feel that it's something I'm very sort of passionate about because of that.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
We can move, just your comment first.
Well, I feel like people hide it quite a lot, especially young people in normal school society, because they're so estranged by the idea that there might be something wrong with them, in a sense that all their friends are happy and they have this weight on themselves because how they are. Like there should be a lot of more education, not just to teachers, even to students as well. I feel like growing up, because I have a friend who does go through depression, and when I found out I was 12 and I had no idea what the hell she was talking about, I was like, what do you mean by you feel uncomfortable and things like that, because I just wasn't taught in school like how that worked. So I feel like, I don't know, that it should just be a bit more taught.
Before you go, I'm just going to memorise that you two want to speak, and then we'll take on because the vein between what you and Kira were saying was about schools. So I was just wondering what you thought, and please keep this as brief as possible, what you think can be done to make sure that teachers are aware of mental health issues,
Training,
how to deal with
training. It comes down to training by professionals, and that needs to be ongoing and part and parcel of becoming a qualified teacher, and also that training that is ongoing as well, so that you can pick that up, understand it, and work with professionals to help people.
Yeah, is that something that we?
I think it's very important that we understand that we spend 6 hours a day in school. You spend 6 hours a day in school, and that is enough time for us to get in our basic curriculum, is to get in our added curriculum. But a lot of the time, it's not enough time to get in different social and economic things that are real problems in our society. It's not enough time to get in mental health. It's not enough time to fit in depression. And I think that should be made a priority. I think it should be more important that we learn about how to handle and how to help people and how to be a kind and just accepting person in society than it is for me to be able to add a algebra equation up.
Yeah, it's I'm just sorry. I've been keeping Chelsea waiting for ages.
My campaign as member of Youth Parliament for Central Amanda is about mental health, as well as topics like sexual health, self-esteem and body image. I did it because 1 in 4 people do suffer from mental health illness, but I was aware of the stigma associated with mental health. And coming back to your point, I think that's why young people don't come out and say, I have bipolar, I have depression, because there is this image associated with having a mental health illness, and it isn't taken as seriously as a physical health. Like you can see if you've broken your leg, or you can see if you've bruised your arm, but you can't actually see what's going on inside your head. So I think education, as well as investing more money in the NHS, is absolute priority. Educating young people about mental health so that this stigma cannot increase, this stigma can't go on anymore. We need to eradicate this stigma, and I think that's kind of like the first thing that you should do.
Okay, I've been keeping people waiting, then you can speak, Cal. Okay, Gal in the blazer that I really want to steal.
So the young farmers during the flooding, we went out and helped the victims of the floods, and I personally met Brian and Mary, who they are really old, and to be honest, they couldn't have done it without my help and the rest of Bridgwater Young Farmers and Somerset Young Farmers. It was our project to help their farm. They couldn't have done it without us. They would have given up farming. They would have moved to the city where somebody could have looked after them, where close to hospitals to help them. They were that close to moving out. They were 4 foot under in water. They had probably depression, probably didn't want to come out and say they had depression. And they are already cut off from the community because they live so far away in Muchelmy or no, wherever they lived, out past Structure 24. They couldn't get to anybody. They had to be rescued by a boat. Their animals had to be taken off. They nearly all drowned. You know, why is the older generation not being looked at? Why don't they have regular doctor's appointments? Why can't they be checked up on? Why can't people? They built our country. We have to remember that. You know, they are keeping farms, milk, pigs, sheep growing for us to eat, or if you're a vegan, whatever. But you know, they still built our country. They built the homes you live in. They organised the companies that you use every single day. So I don't know, why can't they be looked after? And I know it affects young people as well, but mental health also affects old people, and they went through quite a bit, and I think that's unfair.
Okay, so I'm gonna let Callum speak, and then I'm gonna take your 3 comments unless there's anybody else that I can't see. Please remember to raise your hand really high because I've got cloudy glasses, so I can't actually tell whether you've got your hand up or not. So Callum, what did you?
I do feel like this point has been built up loads now, but it isn't also about treating mental health. It's about recognising it as well, because I mean, a lot of the talking has been about how teachers, and it's probably started off by me, how teachers can treat mental health, but it's also how can teachers recognise that one of their students might have really no depression. So where do I cross the line between just having a bad day or going into depression? I don't know the difference. So it's about teachers actually recognising maybe it's a consistent sort of thing.
Okay, one vein from what I took from Cool Blazer Girl when you were speaking. I love your blazer. And one thing that I took from yours was rural isolation. And actually, just going to put British Youth Council point in. That was a thing that the young farmers raised at the British Youth Council ACM about how rural isolation can affect mental health services. So I was just wondering if I could ask the 2 politicians briefly what they would do, because they both got rural constituencies, what they would do if they were elected to help rurally isolated people reach mental health services.
Well, you know, we're saying that you know, we're embedding that in terms of the Labour Party into the National Health Service. And I think that also what you were talking about is really the sort of post-trauma of flooding as well, and that the way that impacted on the health of those people that you were talking about. And I think that is something that the whole of that flooded community need to actually have in terms of that access to the people who can help them now after the flood is over and everything else, that trauma. And it's the same when you get soldiers coming back from war, very similar in the way that, you know, they need help and support sometimes from coming out of that. It's not all over, and some are still living with the fear of that flooding. But it needs to be embedded in the National Health Service as part of the way that we work and treat people. And that's a real value.
Okay, for you? I agree with all of that. Okay, brilliant. That made it easy for me. Okay, so if we can start from this side. So we've got 3 hands, so I'll start with you.
There's about 1,000 students in our school, so that have been about 250 of them suffer with mental health issues, and there's a lot of teachers, so they suffer as well. But there's only 2 people in our school who sort those issues out. So the teachers as well as the students would be struggling. So but they still don't offer support.
I think that goes back to what we were saying about training and signposting for teachers. I mean, can I just take the comments first and then move to you? Because I think you've had your hand up.
Oh yeah, I was going to say. So I was diagnosed a few years ago with Asperger's syndrome. I also tend to get anxiety where I get really, really nervous. But in schools, where different people learn in different environments, there's so much cram into exam. It just completely plays on their stress levels. And any subject that's more practical or allows people to express themselves in a different way, it's just branded as completely easy. And that's the problem, that we don't have enough other ways for people to express themselves, where people with other forms of mental states, they can help solve their anxiety by being around people, by speaking more, because it's not taught speaking in school or anything like that. It's just constantly into an exam, put this on a paper within this time limit.
Okay.
I think the other issue is it's not only an issue that should be looked at in school, also there's organised CAMs that deal with mental health outside of school. And having moved from London a few years ago, I think there's a big difference, especially in rural areas like Somerset, that in London it's quite recognised that there are organisations outside of school where you can speak to someone that you don't know. So there's not the barrier between being embarrassed about how you're really feeling. And I think that there needs to be a lot more awareness that there are, like, I know full well that there's actually a clinic in Taunton that you can go to see qualified CAMS clinicians. And I think that that needs to be brought into school, that is available and you don't have to talk to someone that you know.
Thank you.
Following on from what Chelsea said, I feel like psychology should be brought in a lot more earlier instead of just simply being something as an option to take at college, because people do need a much more wider understanding. Obviously not too in depth, because psychology can be really quite deep at times. But it's just a case of people need to understand what is going on with some people instead of just being like, because I've heard a lot of people, obviously not going to name names, make kind of like bipolar jokes, and that they're just like, oh, my mood swings are so ridiculous, I think I've got bipolar. Well, no, because if you did, you first of all would know it, and it's not something you joke about. So people do need like a much wider understanding of the thing, mental health problems.
Okay, so have any of the panelists got anything that they would like to say in response to what's been said?
Well, I mean, the 1 in 4 point is first, it's to remember, it's 1 in 4 people at some point in their life. So if you go to school with 1,000, that doesn't mean that 250 people are having mental health issues at the moment. And sort of to link it to the next issue, which is about how much we cram into schools, I think that's a serious worry. I think, we're putting more and more pressure onto young people in schools, and schools are becoming much more focused on a narrower range of things, and things like the arts and music and drama. And I mean, drama's the thing that was my great passion at school, but I've got a family of musicians and artists and stuff, and things which aren't necessarily given as much priority, but can be far more important to people's shaping people as individuals, to a genuine broad education, and actually to people's mental health. I think we're far too narrowly focused on some really some excessively academic areas, which put far too much pressure on people in terms of just focusing on passing exams rather than focusing on actually learning and being educated in a much broader sense.
Does anybody else like to comment on that?
I mean, I agree. What the points that you're making in terms of that pressure on institutions, the same pressures that you might get in the workplace. One of the things that I have noticed, though, in terms of my sort of career being a teacher, that girls were much more open about talking about their experiences than boys were as well. They will quite happily sort of talk about what is going on in their life in that way, which was quite revealing, whereas it was much more of a hidden factor in terms of a gender issue for boys to do that, and not having that release in that way, being able to talk and take your concerns somewhere. But I agree with you on the pressure that you're under, and in tests and everything that you've got to go through, all those hoops in order to get somewhere. There's a huge pressure on young people today.
Yeah, and it's like saying, why if somebody can't get 6 C's, why can't they be successful? Maybe there's some other way in which they can be successful rather than for the academic way.
How we measure success.
Yes.
Okay, if we can move on to the next question, if you don't mind. Brilliant. This question's from Grace Madison, and this is quite a specific but a really good one, I think. Would you support the introduction of LGBT sex education? So who's Grace Madison?
Yes, great.
Oh, LGBT.
I'll just go over briefly, like what it means.
Sorry? Grace, did you?
Oh, I said no. Do they know what LGBT means?
Yeah, LGBT. Okay, so I'm aware in the audience that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. Okay, so who's gone first? I think we're back to Theo. I think everybody's gone first. Okay, Theo.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sex education is something far too often people are scared of. It's not introduced early enough, not just about the physical side about it, but about emotions and relationships. It's important that we have that at all levels of schools at the appropriate level, and that includes LGBT issues, because there will be gay, lesbian, bisexual, and potentially transgender students as well, who everyone needs to know how to deal with their developing sexuality. And keeping people in the dark is only going to lead to problems, misery, and all sorts of unintended consequences. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think not only part of that education, but, for some schools, they'll have an LGBT week where they will explore all the issues within that. And, and it's especially around name calling as well, and use of that terminology. I don't know if you were aware or you saw it, but there was a sort of a number of young children, very young children, are sort of going into guidance in terms of transgender, whereby they believe they're in the wrong body.
Yeah.
That is something that's happening now. That probably would not be, if you explained that to an audience before that became public, people would say, no, I can't believe that would ever happen. But it is happening. We're much more tolerant now. We've moved on, we've changed. And therefore, we need to understand that these issues, and especially for young people who might be gay at school and feel upset if certain terminology is used. We must bear that in mind when we're talking to an audience as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have found that.
Sorry, I just want to make sure that all panelists are heard first, and then I'll take it to the audience, if you don't mind. Carl?
To answer the question directly, yes. But I think all of the points that we've covered tonight, the mental health, the LGBT, sex education, and political education, all come under PSHE at the moment. And let's face it, PSHE at the moment isn't good enough. It just isn't good enough. It's taught for 1 hour per week, and it's very lackluster teaching. And whether that's down to because the teachers don't have enough information on certain things, or it's just because it isn't seen as a wider issue in society, but in general, PSHE needs to get a hell of a lot better.
Okay, and Jess?
I agree with Callum, definitely. PSHE needs to get better. And you can see it in the way that we have in my school about a PSHE lesson every month or so. And that's quite a lot of PSHE lessons, to be honest. And all of them are usually either on drugs or sex education. And when we did biology, we managed to cover sexual education in about an hour. It doesn't take that long to learn the mechanics of it. But I think it's really important that we learn how to build proper relationships and how to make sure that we're tolerant of other people, and just to explain the mentality behind it instead of just the mechanics is the most important part. So the LGBT part would definitely come under the PSHE umbrella, and it should definitely be taught in PSHE. I think it should be emphasised that we should be tolerant and understanding of every person and every person's sexual preference or their identity. And I think we should definitely make sure that everyone understands and everyone knows that it's not okay to call people names, or it's not okay to think of people in certain ways. You should make sure that you're tolerant of everyone.
Okay, so Grace, did you have a point to raise on this?
Yeah, obviously as a bisexual female, I find it quite hard at school when people go out calling each other gay, because I'm like, that's rather inappropriate, because I struggled with my sexuality a couple of years, because being bisexual, I couldn't recognise it straight away, because I obviously thought, well, I must be a bit confused then. And I never knew that it was a separate sexuality. So I think teaching it in schools will also help develop mental health. Because obviously I thought something was a little bit wrong in me, because I was like, oh, I like both genders, that can't be right. But I think maybe teaching that in schools under that umbrella will help mental health within schools as well.
Okay, if I can go to you first, and then Chelsea, and then Cool Blazer Girl.
On the news just the other night, I came over this child who went from a boy to a girl, and I think they were like the age of 4 or something. I just want to get your opinion on a statement that somebody said about them, and it was, oh, why are they doing this? They don't even have a wide knowledge of like sexual life. How would they know that transgendering is right for them? I just want to like hear people's opinions on what they believe about that.
If I can go straight to the panel on that one.
Well, it's happening, and it's you probably the very programme that I saw on the news this week, whereby the parents have accepted this. You know, it's not as if, you know, it's something that is hidden here. They've accepted it, and, you know, the children, when they talked to the children, they just felt uncomfortable in the body that they were in, and much preferred to be treated as girls rather than boys.
Colin? Ultimately, nobody knows yourself more than yourself. So if that's the way that they wanted to go, then that's the way that they should go.
Theo? Very few of us in this room, if any, will know what it's like to think you're in the wrong body, to think you're the wrong gender. But if people do, then we need to make it as easy for them as possible. It's very difficult. I've got a number of transgender friends, and they've had all sorts of difficulties over the course of their life getting accepted by their families. Some of them don't speak to their families. It's not easy in society, but I think we just need to treat people with love and accept what they are.
Jess?
I definitely agree with what Theo's saying, and I definitely think that it is important that we obviously accept everyone for who they are and who they want to be. But I also understand the point in which people are saying that they're only 4 years old, they don't know what they're saying. But if they truly believe, in the purest sense of the word, that they don't belong in the body that they're in, who are we to say that they can't change who they are, they can't have that operation, they can't have those drugs change themselves into a girl or a boy as they see fit? I think it's their body, I think it's what they choose to do. And if they, at that age, they already know that that's wrong for them, then should we be the ones who could really tell them no?
Okay, Chelsea?
You said that society was more tolerant. Personally, I don't think it is. I have nothing against that at all. I think if it was more tolerant and 100% accepting, I don't think we'd be having this discussion now. It would already be in the curriculum. I think just having heterosexual sex education, you're kind of expecting everybody to be straight, where there are people like us and LGBT people that it hasn't appealed to already. So yeah, I don't really know if I agree with saying that it was more tolerant, because it would have already been happening now.
Okay.
I'm at Bridgwater College. I love it. In the hair and beauty, obviously, some people's cup of tea, some people's not cup of tea. There is a boy who dresses as a girl, wears heels, makeup, the lot, you name it, he's got it. And there's a drama student as well. Now, my mum works at college, and she said to them, we need to have a unisex toilet. We need to make sure that they can feel, if one day they feel like a boy, they can go in the boys' toilets. If one day they feel like a girl, they could go in the girls' toilets, but they can't, can they? Because they're a boy. They look like a boy. So she got a unisex toilet put in, and I think that for maybe Grace, maybe that's not how she'd like to go down the route at school, but I think it's important that having a toilet where it's mutual, if it's not a set, because some people don't feel comfortable going into their own sex, and you have to keep changing rooms the same, or boys, girls, but it's not, toilets don't have to be set for two different genders. You can have a unisex toilet. There's unisex toilets in Marks and Spencer's. There's not a disabled male toilet and a disabled female toilet. We don't single disabled people out. We just have a disabled toilet. Why can't we just have a unisex toilet?
Okay.
I wanted to ask about going back to the point of teaching it in school, LGBT and stuff. There's a lot of labels that I've heard about. I don't obviously know what they are, but is that what we're thinking about when we say either teaching LGBT, or are we thinking more like the safer, like in sex ed, it's always about how to do things safely and stuff. Is it more going down that route, or actually introducing people? Because, it can be quite difficult to, like, as Jess said, people cover that stuff in like 1 hour. Like I had 2 weeks of sex ed for like a few lessons, and that was it. So how are we, like, what is the route that people want to go down when it's LGBT, talking about that?
Well, I think...
Sorry, I was just checking if you've got your hand up, haven't you?
Yeah, I was going to say, in school, I've noticed when it's sex ed, it's more talking about biological and how to have safe sex, as she said, but it's not talking about enough about the relationship side of it and how to respect how a person thinks, like if someone's straight or someone's gay, and the way they think with their head and how to have productive, healthy relationships. It's in the name, however, it never appears to actually be taught in the lesson. It just appears to be let's have a laugh and get this over with in an hour.
Okay, so in terms of what's been said, I think Chelsea's point about, which was a challenge to what you said about this being a more tolerant society, I mean that was a general assumption amongst all the panelists. What would you say that, if I can just advance what you said a little bit into a question, would you say that the problems for the LGBT community have evolved, or that the situation has just become empirically better?
The LGBT groups have brought this to the public agenda. That's what they've done. And it's not hidden anymore. But you've got to remember, at one time, even for teachers, there was an act whereby you couldn't talk about homosexuality. And you know, things have changed. That act has gone. And that's what the, gay people campaigned against and so forth. It was Section 28, that's what it was known as. And there were real severe restrictions. I know there are teachers in schools, especially in London, under the Prevent scheme, have got to be able to identify potential terrorists as well. So, there's, again, it does change a little bit, but I think that we are more tolerant. There is a long way to go.
Yeah.
There are lots of people out there who will not accept it. But, I believe that we, just by having this conversation today, shows how we have moved on and the way that we actually accept people far better today, simply by understanding that and going back. It is about relationships, and that's which the discussion should be about. But many teachers can feel uncomfortable about talking about the issues themselves.
Okay, can I just go to Grace, because I didn't go to Grace earlier.
It's quite a brief point. There's a famous actress called, I think her name's Louise. She's a USA actress. She's in a show called Orange is the New Black, and she's a transsexual actress. And she won an award for Orange is the New Black, and she was on the front newspapers of quite a few magazines. And they noted that hate crime against transsexuals went up 8% since she was on the magazine. So just because we're tolerant about certain issue doesn't mean other people in the world are. And sometimes by putting it out there, we're actually putting other people in danger. So many people won't speak out because they're scared it may put them in danger against people who aren't as tolerant.
So that's Laverne Cox, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't pronounce her name. I was like, oh.
On that point as well, if you want to see how the society stigma against LGBT people has changed, watch the film Pride. Absolutely fantastic film. So I would recommend to you all watch Pride.
I love that
All
film.
milk.
Yeah.
All Milk, that's a good film as well.
I wouldn't for a minute doubt that society is not as accepting and tolerant and loving as it should be. But last year, I went to 2 same-sex weddings in this country. Now, the first same-sex wedding I went to was in 1998 in the Netherlands. It's taken us a long time, but we've got same-sex marriage in this country. In recent years, we've introduced same-sex civil partnerships. In my lifetime, the age of consent for gay men has gone from 21 to 18 to 16. I have family friends who have been together for longer than my parents, who got married in the early 1970s. And when they got together, their relationship was illegal. So I think we live in a vastly more tolerant and accepting world than we used to, but there's still a long way to go. But we've made huge progress in the last 15 years.
That's kind of what I meant by that. I think with laws and that kind of thing, some have been dropped, more have been introduced. I think as a whole, like more socially, I don't think it has been significantly more tolerant. There is obviously still that stigma. Like I've heard jokes like it's quite common amongst friends to refer to homosexuals as being like wrong. Like I won't say it. So that's kind of what I meant by that socially rather than law. If that makes sense.
I think socially it's changed an awful lot. I think socially it's an awful lot better than it was 10 or 20 years ago. Certainly from my recollection, attitudes to gay people in this country have come on leaps and bounds in that time. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect and there isn't a long way to go, but it really has changed hugely for the better.
Okay,
I think what everyone's just basically says is better, but it's just still not good enough. Yeah. I don't think we ever will be saying that it's just good enough, because I think everyone should be accepted. From an early age, everyone should know that this is perfectly fine. You can be who you want to be, no questions asked, no answers needed to be given. I don't think we should have to put labels on people. I don't think we should have to explain ourselves to anyone else. And you should just accept who everyone else is and who you are quite freely.
Okay, I think that's the last question that we can get to today. I'd like to thank the panellists, so we can have a round of applause for everybody who's been on the panel. Secondly, I'd like to thank Somerset Film who've put this on. It's been a really good event, and obviously the Youth Parliament members, so there's Kira, Chelsea, Jess, and then Callum, and Mimi, and everybody who's taken a part in trying to make this happen today, because I think it's been a really good event. Okay,
Can I just sort of say a big thank you to you, because this has been a really good event, and it just proved to me tonight that yes, votes for 16-year-olds differently and 17-year-olds, but you know it's been one of the best hustings that I've been to in the sense of the questions that you brought up and the discussion that we've had as well.
Okay, Phil.
I'd just like to thank you all as well as one of the people been involved in organising it. I'd also like to thank, if I may, the team from Access FM, Tom, Jason and the team, and the YMCA for hosting the event this evening, Martin and Sam and the team, and to thank you all for being here, and particularly to thank Kate as well from the Youth Service who's made it happen. And I'd like to say personally, I'm really moved by the contributions that people have made, and I just think this is the tip of the iceberg, and we should be doing many more of these kinds of events and giving young people the opportunity to be heard, because it's so important that you are heard, and what you've got to say is so valuable.
Brilliant, thank you. Oh,
can we all thank Sam as well?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. That concludes it. Right, thank you to everybody who's come. I mean, I think your contributions were all excellent. I love the questions; they're all really good. I'm sorry I couldn't get through some of them, and some of them were brilliant, but they were really, really technical. I was like, what? Like about coalition arrangements and stuff. So maybe you might want to, if that was one of your questions, you might want to bring it up with either the Labour or the Dem representatives in the room. Anyway, thank you.